Metroid games are usually fairly well loved. Personally, I've only played 3 in my lifetime. The original NES game, to which I've still never completed, Super Metroid on the SNES, which I've played many times, and today's review, Metroid Fusion, or Metroid 4 according to the intro screens, which was yet another game that I took with me to Afghanistan during my military service. If you've never played it, yet are a fan of the series, you should know that there are definitely some quirks with the game, but it's still a must-play. It starts out with a fairly long intro describing how Samus is exploring some planet and then gets attacked by a brand new organism named X. I know, it's real creative. Due to its predatory nature, the X saps Samus down to an inch of her life, infecting her suit and her vitals. Scientists cut apart pieces of her suit to save her life, and so on and so forth. As I said, it's a fairly lengthy entrance to the game, which all amounts to her exploring a massive space station to figure out what X is ultimately up to, and also to figure out how to stop it. You, of course, play as Samus, and due to her suit getting ripped to shreds, she no longer has any of the abilities she had in the previous games. No wave shot, no ice beam, no morph ball. Of course, you'll come across this stuff again, but instead of the statues you find that grant you these new skills, instead, you're given permission to use them at specific times by the Galactic Federation HQ. You'll be told by your commander to hunt down a data room, and the ability will be downloaded to your suit this way. Sounds strange? I'll slow down. Samus is given her objectives by a computer AI that acts as her commander. The space station is separated into 7 different areas. A main lobby, if you will, and then 6 sub-areas that kind of act as levels. Each area has its own theme and purpose in the space station. As you enter a section, Samus must stop at a navigation room and be given her next mission. By using these navigation rooms, the gameplay is much more linear than previous Metroid games. You're given the majority of the map immediately upon entering one of these rooms, and important areas such as save rooms and the boss area is immediately shown most of the times. Once you clear your objective, whether it be to unlock a door, defeat a boss, or get a new skill, you'll have to return to the navigation room and find out your next objective. Some people may not like this new system. I could go either way with it. I love the open-ended gameplay of the original few games, but at the same time, due to the heavy emphasis on plot and story, the linearity works. You can eventually venture from your expected route to power up a bit stronger with more missiles, bombs, etc., but it's not required at any time. Speaking of weapons, there is a downsized arsenal. All you really have in this one are the regular missiles, morph ball bombs, power bombs, and the corkscrew attack, in addition to the upgraded primary weapon types. You might ask, well, where are the super missiles, the grappling hook, and the X-ray beam? Well, I guess X devoured it. You also lose the ice beam, a series staple for a long time. This is because of Samus' new weakness to extreme cold, since the Federation had to formulate a vaccine from a Metroid to cure her of her X infection. In order to get around this, you're given ice missiles as an upgrade about halfway in through the game. You don't have to select through any of your sub-weapons, as the R button activates them. And when you get the diffusion upgrade, you can hold R to power up the ice missile, give it a sort of area of effect status. Same goes with the power bombs. Just roll up in your morph ball, press R, and then press B to drop a power bomb instead of a regular bomb. You might be thinking, but Reaper, if you lose all of these weapons, how do you open the different locked doors? Well, there are now security terminals, which kind of act like keycards. At specific points in the game, you're told to hunt down one of these unmapped areas to grant access behind the colored doors. Again, it feels a bit out of place in a Metroid game, considering that since the beginning of the series, we're used to firing missiles at doors to open them, but the change works here. Of course, since the security stations won't appear on the map, you will have to do some exploring for them, and thankfully the mini-map returns. A nice change is that if there's an upgrade available in that room, you'll see an open circle. Once you obtain it, it'll switch to a dot. It helps you keep track of what power-ups you may have had to pass, and return to nav once you get a few new abilities. Speaking of, there are a few new skill sets in the game, since Samus loses a few things. She can now grab on the ledges, a welcome addition to the game. Instead of needing the grappling hook, there are instead a few ladders both on walls and also on the ceiling that Samus can hang and climb from. There's also a morph ball jump, allowing her to leap around while rolling around. You're going to need all these weapons and skills because I found the game to be much more difficult than previous games. Much of this might be due to the new way that Samus increases her health after taking damage. There are restoration rooms that max out her life and weapons, but in the middle of the space station, she's able to absorb any X organisms that are floating around. They obviously won't stand still and be defeated, so when killing off enemies, the X will either fly away, morph into a new enemy, or upgrade an existing one into a tougher form. If you can snag the X before it does any of those, you'll gain a bit of health. The trick is that by trying to capture a loose X blob, you may take more damage by leaping towards an X, and while it flies away, you bump into a different enemy. And enemies in this game seem to do a lot more damage this time around. It wasn't uncommon for me to look up and see that simple hits were taking away half of an energy tank. And then there's the ultimate enemy of the game, the SAX. This is a carbon copy form of Samus' most powered up form, created by the X that may have originally attacked Samus. It will hunt you down at times, and it will not hesitate to eat you for dinner. Early on in the game, it will only show its presence, but you won't be in any true danger. But as you start to get powered up and amass energy reserves, you'll run into it and it will give chase, forcing you to think a bit to learn how to outsmart it. There weren't many times where this occurs though, but when it does happen, it can get fairly stressful quickly, as one bad move and it's back to a save point with you. It's a shame that when you finally have a showdown with SAX with proper weaponry, that it's not as epic as it may have felt it should be. Oh well. Due to the SAX practically stalking you all game, this part of the series is fairly foreboding in its atmosphere. Most areas seem to have a creepy, dark, abandoned feel to them, which is accurate due to the X-Parasite taking over the base. The music helps add to this, as for the most part, it's slow, although some of it does feel Star Trek-y in nature, such as the theme that plays as you're traveling to a new section of the space station after completing an objective. The graphics also feel a bit darker most of the time, but I do question Samus' look. Instead of having a default yellow-orangish suit, due to the Federation having to rip it off her, you get a blue suit with tiny bits of the original color. It just looks strange. There are multiple suits you get to eventually find in the Varia and Gravity suits, which help fix this odd color decision, but I can't get over how strange and out of place Samus looks in the blue. I just couldn't get over this change. Overall, that's all I got from Metroid Fusion. Don't let the point-to-point nature of the game deter you from playing it if you have enjoyed Metroid games in the past. It's still a really fun game. Do I prefer it over Super Metroid or even the original? Hard to say. I found the original NES release to be difficult to get into due to its lack of a minimap, although I found myself drawing my own maps when playing again recently. But Super Metroid definitely is slightly better. But again, this shouldn't steer you away from Fusion. Taken as its own little game, it's really fun, and at times nerve-wracking whenever the SAX appears. Give it a shot if you can find it, which should be fairly simple, although it runs for about $30 at the time of this writing. Final score? 8 out of 10. This is Reaper. Happy fragging.